Welcome in. Hail to the podcast, brought to you by Maize and Blue.
Yeah, you might want to hit live.
What?
It's not live.
Yes, it is.
Oh, it is now.
It's been live for 12 seconds.
No, it didn't say that. It didn't say it. It didn't say it. It literally just popped up on my screen.
Well, we're off to a hot start. I'm going to be interested to see who's right or wrong here. I'm going to go with you.
It's all right. Whatever. You can just start over.
It popped up right away for me.
Yeah, there you go. 2-1.
Whatever. You're both fired.
As you can see, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus here for a while. That is my doing. I will post a longer video, probably just on my own personal Twitter at some point. That way people can choose whether they want to watch it or not. But short version, been dealing with some health stuff, and I appreciate everybody that's reached out support-wise. I'm not a big fan of like getting sympathetic messages. It kind of makes me feel weird, and I needed it. You guys have been great. Everybody on Twitter and the over at the Den, our subscribers, everybody's been amazing. So procedure tomorrow, and then hopefully we're in the clear. And good futures ahead. And obviously my teammates joining me today, Josh and Brock, have been absolutely incredible carrying for me while I've done absolutely nothing for the site for the last month. And then Josh, of course, always great boss, great friend. I appreciate you, brother. So I'm excited. I didn't know if I'm going to be able to do another show next week. So I figured I'm feeling kind of good. Let's get this one in. We've got football talk, obviously. The summer is here. That means recruiting. Had our first kind of big weekend. Josh is going to have a little bit on that. Obviously, most of that intel starts to trickle in on Monday. We're recording this live here Sunday, but Josh will have some thoughts there. Then obviously looking forward to June recruiting, and what Michigan's got to do here is obviously there is momentum from a national championship, but also starting from scratch with largely a new staff. And then we're going to talk about the transfer portal window. Still a chance maybe a DT gets added, but largely that has come to an end. We have a good idea of the moves Michigan has made. So we're going to get into a few positions most impacted by the portal and how we think those things are going to shake out. So let's get into it. Intel Insider Publisher, Mr. Mason Blue Review himself, Mr. Josh Henschke. It is good to see you, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have you. It's good to have you around. We've missed your face around these parts. But yeah, before we get going here, obviously would like to talk about our podcast sponsor, Wes Romberger from My Perfect Franchise. Would you like to escape corporate America for good? Maybe you'd like to start a business on the side and keep your corporate gig. Wes can help. Wes is a franchise consultant as well as a business owner and can help you find a franchise that fits your skill set, financial requirements, how much time you have to commit, and more. A franchise is a business startup and operations kit, perfect for those with general business skills who may not have specific knowledge on starting and running a small business. His services are 100% free, and he's here to help if you have any questions about business ownership. You can reach him by phone at 512-970-7478 or see him on the web at myperfectfranchise.net/aboutwest. And again, that's 512-970-7478. Thank you again, West, for sponsoring the podcast. And again, 100% free services. You know, it's worth, if you're looking for a change of pace, definitely worth reaching out, see how he can help you.
Absolutely. And yeah, West is a day one. So appreciate his support on the pod, and then obviously over at the site as well, part of our subscriber chat. Definitely check Josh's profile, check our site. We have everything for his info if you happen to miss it. So also joining us, Mr. Brock Heilig in his usual not hijacked, not held hostage location, looking comfortable, usually wearing a pink shirt. This is all feeling very normal to me, Brock. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's
good, brother.
It's been good. Happy June to everyone out there. I love June because the sun sets at like 10 p.m. nowadays. It's crazy. Yeah. And for me personally, it affects my overall mood in a good way when the sun's out. When the sun's out longer and you can be outside, warm air. It's beautiful, beautiful summer so far.
Yeah, the seasonal depression starts to fade away when you get it's tough with my kid because he can't sleep because it's so bright outside still. But yeah, seeing the sun, it's good for you. It's amazing how much better you feel. I grilled yesterday for the first time in a while. I was like, just being able to stand outside. How great, right?
Yeah.
All right. So June also means football because football is a year-round sport. But like I said, we've kind of come to an interesting moment of transition now where a lot of dust has settled on the roster. Recruiting is obviously going to pick up heavily. And it's not going to be long before we're talking about fall camp here. So wanted to get into a few position groups that we thought were either most affected by the portal because of additions of subtractions, or maybe not at all. And that first category is going to be quarterback because there was no portal addition. Now, dead horse, we have explained this over and over again in regards to, Michigan playing late into the season, being a part of the playoff and what that had to do in terms of transfer portal impact, JJ's late decision, and then guys that maybe initial feelers were felt out didn't enter the portal, who did enter the portal, just really didn't seem to be a match. And even then, the coaches have been pretty consistent. They were largely happy with what they had in this quarterback room. And we saw a spring window that kind of ended with, again, this team really, it feels like Alex Orji, it's his job to go out and win. Davis Warren has put himself strong into the competition as well. And then Jack Tuttle, confirmed by head coach Strohmore, now healthy, 100% a part of this battle. Josh, now that we know we have a healthy Tuttle, and some of Orji's comments as well, I found interesting, not bad. I think some people really liked them, but I also look back to maybe how Kate or JJ handled it. He basically said, "Look, I'm going to do whatever it takes for this team to win. It's not starter or bust for him. Good team comments, but maybe if you want a guy to go out there and win that job, you might have been like, huh, right? Reading into it too much, probably. But anyway, healthy Tuttle, Orji still mantle open, ready to take. What do you think? I mean, obviously, we're not going to know till the week before the game.
Yeah.
But what do you think about this quarterback battle as we sit here today? No new Tuttle's kind of like a transfer edition, I guess, in a weird way.
Yeah. Technically speaking, yeah. I mean, wasn't really involved in the spring, and then obviously is expected to be full go come full camp. So yeah, in a way, it's kind of an addition there. I don't know how that addition is really going to impact things as a whole. I mean, at this point, it really feels like Orji has to totally screw this thing up in order to not get the job come fall. I mean, they're basically like, take this job, please, just take it. And for the most part, I mean, he's been doing that. 3 times since spring's been done, I've had someone tell me that this is Orji's job heading into the fall camp. And obviously, just because you've got the job right now heading into fall camp doesn't mean that you will get the job come fall. But I do think that at least Davis Warren has to bring his performance up another level to take over from where Orji's at. I mean, obviously, Tuttle, we can't really speak on him because he didn't do much in the spring. So there's no real baseline for him yet. So at this point, Orji's totally going to have to screw this just completely up and just have a really horrible fall to not at least be seriously considered for playing time, or Warren stepping his game up, which honestly, if you're talking about best case scenarios, it would likely be Tuttle or Warren stepping their game up to another level. I mean, I don't think it's Orji or bust. I think there is a winner somewhere on this group of quarterbacks. You're just going to have to find it. And the best case scenario is that they won it because they outperformed the rest, not because one guy fell behind and then another guy took over. So obviously you want the best out of that group. But man, right now, if it's not Orji at the by game 1, I would be very, very surprised and quite frankly disappointed, because he's been talked up by so many people about him being next up and him wanting to take on a leadership role and all that. It would honestly be quite disappointing to see that not work out. So well, there's really going to be nothing, even from now until fall camp. There's going to be nothing that determines the pecking order because the coaches can't coach and don't have their hands on these guys. So, so now we're kind of in a holding pattern until August when fall camp starts back up. But if it's not Orgy come week 1, something either very bad had to have happened or something very good in the opposite direction happened, which. Again, as I said, not the worst case scenario if that's what indeed happens.
Yeah, there have just been a lot of subtle things that have pointed toward Alex Orgy winning the job. Trevor, you've talked a lot about, you've made very astute observations of how he's always the one that's being posted on social media. He's the one hanging out with teammates at these events and things like that. And it does seem like Michigan is begging him to take the job. And even something that I noticed recently too is if you look at any of the gameplay videos that are out there on Twitter or on social media, Alex Orgy is the quarterback, and it's not Jack Tuttle, it's not Davis Warren. And does NCAA 25 gameplay affect who Michigan?
Oh, you mean the video? Yeah. You notice how long his dreads were too?
Yeah.
That was like Bernard Robinson length.
Yeah.
It's
not as bad as they made Jackson Arnold a black guy, but the old Madden game back in the day when it first came out, Mike Vick was like very, very light skinned. It was like, what the hell are you guys doing?
Yeah.
So they'll have to patch a few players, but it, like you said, those, I don't want to read into that stuff too much. Right. But
that it doesn't have a direct impact on what Michigan does at quarterback. Obviously that's going to happen in fall camp, but all signs are pointing toward Alex Orgy being the starter in the fall. And I agree with Josh. Either he's got to screw something up really bad, and if he's not the starter on August 31st against Fresno State, then either he screwed up, or you got to give credit to Jack Tuttle or Davis Warren, whichever one of them may step up and earn the job. I totally agree. Either something really bad or something good happened. But yeah, I do get the sense, like your average fan is saying, a lot of the Michigan fans are leaning toward Alex Orgy just because of the potential, the athleticism, things like that.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I don't think there's any question he's the highest ceiling prospect. We don't know what the floor is, right? Look, Tuttle has experience, but it's experience being in college, being around a college football program, not starting, right? I mean, I think if you combined all of his reps together, he probably doesn't have starter level. So asking him to come out and play that level of games, we know what he is in terms as a leader and future coach, right? He's going to be a GA next year. He's going to be a coach. That's why he transferred here. I've talked about the potential, of a 2 quarterback system almost. And I've come around, maybe just because Tuttle wasn't there all spring, or maybe it is because of the vibes and the things we've discussed. I don't see that anymore. I don't see what the gain is there. Right. I'm so happy for Davis Warren. Again, anybody who doesn't know his story, but like, he's just awesome kid, incredible human, the things he's been through. And nobody knew he was hurt last year because he didn't complain about it. He didn't talk about it. Right. Last year was probably a year where if he's healthy, he's carving out that backup role and probably in a very different position coming this spring in terms of the QB battle. So I'm good to see him at least in the conversation. But yeah, I'd be shocked if it's not Orgy at this point. And I think it would feel very, I don't know. It'd be like, deflating almost, right?
Yep. Yeah.
I don't remember exactly how you put it, Josh, but that's it, and yeah, like Andy says, sounds like he's the next leader of the program QB wise. Yeah. I've had people ask like, why are you guys pushing Orgy so much? And like,
well, it's because they're doing it for us.
Right. I'm responding to what I'm hearing. I'm not
right.
making I've made this clear too. When it comes to like the passing thing, none of us know.
Yeah.
We haven't passed at all. Right. Tuttle had good numbers in mop-up duty last year. He was looking good before, he got hurt on the sideline there. But like, we haven't seen we have no idea, no clue what these guys are going to do. Week 2, Texas.
Yeah.
Right. This isn't like previous years. You're not using those first 3 games to figure it out.
Exactly.
Right. So your hope is if it is Orgy's the guy and he comes out week 1, Fresno, has a hell of a week, and then you go into Texas and you're like, all right, let's go. And big picture, I mean, I want to get into these other positions. With the defense Michigan has, right, they don't need a top 10 performance, JJ McCarthy level quarterback play to win the Big Ten this year.
Mm-hmm.
They don't need that. They need a guy that's not going to turn the ball over, make a few plays, maybe expand some plays with his run game, i.e. Orgy, right? It's going to be so interesting. This is just, we're entering such a new world, not just for Michigan, but college football in general, right? Yep. So I think another concern or big question mark we've had with quarterback is who are they going to throw it to? Right? This wide receiver room. Look, I'm very excited about Tyler Morris. I'm very excited about Samaj Morgan. They don't have the experience that Cornelius Johnson and Roman Wilson had. They just don't. And the depth behind them was a question mark, especially with Carmelo English was a second-year receiver along with Fred Moore and Samaj Morgan, two guys we think are going to step up this year. Thought English was going to come in and play some Z, backup slot, have a role. He ends up not being a part of the program anymore. Darius Clemens, again, is a bummer in terms of the guy we thought he was going to be, not the guy he has been. The expectation of him being the star X receiver this year wouldn't have been fair. It just wouldn't have, but it's still a guy not there anymore, right? So Michigan does make a couple additions in the portal, a very interesting one in Amorian Walker. Josh, I want you to kind of get into, I think people have some misconceptions about, he wanted to play wide receiver. Yeah. They moved him to DB. He's at Ole Miss. The reason he came back was like, hey, let's get you back at receiver, right? And then CJ Charleston, we can get into him as well. But those two guys come in, and they kind of join the Mo receivers, Morris, Morgan, Moore. That's going to be fun all year. But how do you feel about what Michigan's done here at the receiver position and then just the group overall now? Is there a wide receiver one candidate? Is there enough depth for whoever, probably Orgy, but whoever the QB is going to be?
Yeah, well, to answer the number one receiver question first, I mean, it's going to be Tyler Morris. He's going to be wide receiver number one. And I don't think it's going to be close. I mean, again, like Orgy, there's been so many times that I've had unprompted people be like, hey man, Morris is a dog. Like I know for a fact, one person told me like, oh, I was talking to someone and, I was asking, who's going to be that dog on the offense. And Tyler Morris was the first name that was brought up. And, they even went as far as saying like, yeah, no one's really talking about him. Like people need to be talking about Tyler Morris more. And, it's easy to not talk about him because realistically, he only has that one play from Alabama. And I'm not even downplaying that play. I mean, that was an impressive as hell play, but that's the only thing he has. But however, at the same time, if that's what he has, then, you got to look at the upside of what he could bring. And it's a lot there. So I think heading into the season, Morris obviously is the number one guy. And, I think Colston Loveland is going to be added into the mix too, and is going to take some catches. Marlon Klein, obviously. But, as far as their additions, I mean, would I have liked them to see them bring in more experience? Yeah. Some size. Yeah. But Amorian Walker is an original guy that, that should have stuck at wide receiver. I think that was just Jim Harbaugh trying to get too cute with the process of, finding potential guys who can make position switches. And, so it is what it is. I think, there's plenty of promise there. I mean, just you can tell by the offers of a kid that a lot of programs kind of see it, see the projection there. So Walker, yeah, I mean, I would expect him to get involved somewhat as a kind of a bigger ish receiver on the outside. And CJ Charleston, I mean, yeah, you're talking about a guy from Youngstown State. I mean, I'm not going to dog the competition because we've seen guys who have played lesser competition come in and perform really, really well. So, you know, if he can get anywhere near his stat line he had last year, which was what, like 500 odd yards and 5 touchdowns, I think that's a good year for him, and I think that's a good thing for Michigan if they're getting that kind of.
Well, he's arguably the Carmelo English replacement. He's the guy that can play the Z slot backup wide receiver 4.
Yep.
So if I go from a guy who hasn't seen the field to a guy who has experience.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much, I mean, that's what Michigan did with all of their additions, really, is they kind of, in a way, kind of traded like for like, but added guys with experience. You know, I think that's the big thing, is that, you know, you're trading guys that didn't really see the field much, don't have much in terms of experience, and then you're replacing that with guys who've seen a lot of football. I think that's the ideal way to address departures, but also not stealing depth chart spots from people who also deserve to play too. So, and then obviously Samaj and Fred. I think Fred's the most interesting receiver out of all of these groups, because this guy can do it all, really. I mean, he can do the dirty work. He can take the little short slot routes and also can go long. So he's a guy
on the team.
Yeah. And he's a guy that could do a lot of different things for Michigan, and that could pay off for him big time. And then obviously Samaj is looking to take that next step. You know, I think he just needs to continue what he's doing and then just add to it, you know, take it to the next level. You know, no issues with the trajectory of Morgan, and if he can get involved in the special teams as well, even better, because I think he's got the ability to make plays in pretty much all facets of the game. So, yeah, I mean, is this group gonna you know, pop out at you when you go through other receivers in the Big Ten? No, but that's never really been Michigan's MO of late. You know, just need to get these guys snaps. You need to see what you have. You're just fortunate this year that you have a Colston Loveland to kind of offset the inexperience that you have here. And then obviously you got to factor in Marlon Klein as well, someone that will absolutely see some snaps too. But again, and we've said this multiple times, you know, there's this team isn't bad. It's just inexperience. You just don't know what you have. There's talent here, and just this, and the same thing goes with the receivers. There's talented receivers here. You just don't really know what you have, and obviously that stuff gets taken care of on the field, and we'll see pretty quickly, you know, what these receivers look like as the season goes on, for sure.
I agree with Josh. I would have liked to have seen Michigan pick up a big body outside receiver there in the portal, but that's, to be honest, they're just inexperienced, just like Josh said. There's the talent is there, but the experience is not. And I do think having a big body there on the outside to throw the ball to in like a 50-50 type of play would have helped Michigan this upcoming season if they couldn't get the passing game going. And CJ Charleston really isn't that. Amorian Walker could be. He's tall and lengthy, but he's not terribly experienced either. So
it's like getting Andrew Anthony back.
Right. Exactly. And so it's really tough to figure out what this wide receiver room is going to be, because you've got so many guys that really do ooze with talent. Amorian Walker has a lot of potential. Tyler Morris, we saw it against Alabama. Samaj Morgan showed out in multiple occasions there late in the season. The Purdue game, you know, that end around, the Indiana game when he proved his jukebox nickname there and got into the end zone. Like and against Iowa too, the punt return that he almost took back for a touchdown. He's shown potential too. Fred Moore, we saw in the spring game. There are a lot of guys with a lot of potential, but experience is just going to be the biggest thing. And it's going to have to come quick, because like you said, Trevor, Texas is week 2, and you don't have time to just sit there and try and figure stuff out.
It's weird because we forget what the wide receiver room looked like going into last year. I'd argue in terms of depth of potential, they are better this year, right? Cornelius had been a leading receiver. You knew what you had with Roman Wilson. You didn't know he was going to be as good as he was, because he had been pretty consistent the 2 years before that. Behind them, though, I was still really intrigued about Clemens' potential, but he hadn't done anything. Tyler Morris, again, potential, hadn't done anything. I think he had like 2 receptions at that point. Samaj Morgan was a freshman, right? I think people forget, like we talked about the hype coming out of spring with Samaj Morgan and Fred Moore, but what did we say? How many times do we see that with freshmen and then it doesn't actually translate to the field, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it was very much Cornelius Roman, and then I guess we'll see. And this year, with Morris, I've talked about going into last year, had he had stayed in the Z role and Roman been in the slot, I think Morris has a much bigger year. But what happens is Roman kind of takes over, stays in that Z Ronnie Bell role, and that opens the door for Samaj Morgan to play more slot. So now Morris is in his natural position. Samaj is in his natural position. Fred's going to contribute. I hope Walker, again, I don't know what you need from him. If he goes out, gets 20 receptions, a few touchdowns, a couple hundred yards, I'm happy. Like you said with Charleston coming in, I would have loved, I can't think of the guy's name now, but there were, obviously McCauley from Indiana was an early transfer portal target. I was really intrigued by, was it Banks from Wake Forest, ended up going to Nebraska right around the time JJ declared. And then the Syracuse receiver ends up at Utah. Those are 6'4", 6'5", 210 guys with experience that would have been really nice to add. But, and Josh mentioned it, it's been mentioned in the comments, I think the answer is on the team, and I think it's Colston Loveland. And I did an article. I don't want to get into this too deep. Go to Michigan.Rivals or search by the numbers Colston Loveland. I knew I was going to find like wide receiver 1 level numbers for Loveland when I did this, but I was blown away. So after week 5 last year, Loveland had, it's only one, but if you look at the receptions, 30 to 29 with Roman, 32 for CJ, more yards by 5, same number of touchdowns, more yak, same number of first downs after week 5. So you take out Roman's big early non-con games, Loveland's already there in terms of wide receiver 1 production, right?
Yeah.
Where it gets crazier, though, is that's not as a tight end. Loveland last year lined up in the slot 49% of the time, out wide 18.9%. That seemed like a lot to me. I looked into it. No tight end in college football lined up out wide more than Colston Loveland last season.
Wow.
And that was with Cornelius Johnson on the roster, right? So that number theoretically could go up, right? And okay, what does that mean? Is he a deep threat? Yes, he's the best deep threat receiver in college football. They just didn't take advantage of it. 7 targets, 7 receptions on throws over 20 yards or more to Colston Loveland, 206 yards, 29 yards per reception, 3 touchdowns, so 3 for 7. Only 11% of his targets were deep, but literally perfect QB rating, perfect receiving rating. Why not more, right? So we'll see, but maybe that's your answer at the X receiver. Marlon Klein has been brought up a ton and his rise, right? Maybe that's it. Maybe Loveland's going out wide more. Maybe he's in the slot more and he's the wide receiver 1 big body answer. And if that's the case, and I have the speed guys that can do the crossing routes and do the end arounds and the short yards with big yak in Morris, Morgan, Moore, Walker, I actually really start to like what they're doing with this group a lot. So we'll see how Loveland factors in. We didn't even mention Donovan Edwards, really.
Yeah.
Technically wide receiver last year wide receiver 3 in terms of receptions last year. He could be a big part of the equation as well. But yeah, I think I agree with you guys. They didn't get that big body with experience I would have liked. Walker's intriguing. I'm glad he's back. Jim Harbaugh has made a lot of really, really good decisions when it comes to position changes. That was one in hindsight where, maybe you were worried about the depth over at corner, and then DJ Waller, Jair Hill ends up, maybe that one didn't make a ton of sense in hindsight. But hey, here we are. And speaking of corner, that's obviously the other group. We got one more position, both secondary, corner and safety, but we'll stay in corner first. I just mentioned DJ Waller's strong freshman year last year. Josh Wallace comes in. Some folks didn't have crazy high expectations for him. I remember I had made a comp. It was kind of like Jamon Green coming back was how I felt about it. And it was like, you've got your CB2, but maybe one of the young guys takes the role. Nobody took the role. Josh Wallace ended up having a phenomenal season. DJ Waller got some good experience. So did Hill. Waller ends up transferring out after the spring. So Jair Hill, who had a really strong spring and a lot of talk that he was already a strong leader at that CB2 position, And then Cam Calhoun was a transfer out as well. So we were wondering what Michigan was going to do here. And they go out and they add Amir Hall, who is, what do you call, is that FCS All-American then? Is that how you, yep, FCS All-American. And Ricky Johnson, who's an interesting guy, another dude, again, experience, somebody that comes in. Where do you guys, I'm torn on this because it's exactly what you want to add in terms of experienced corners that could be a part of the competition and also add depth, because behind Will Johnson and Jair Hill, it was like, oh man, where's the depth here? But in terms of rotation or even that CB2 spot, how do you see this shaking out with Hall, Johnson, and then, like I said, your sophomore Jair Hill, some experienced guys you already have on roster like Keyshawn Harris?
Sorry, I've been distracted because I want to jam my head through this damn monitor by reading these comments that we're going through right now. I mean, I think besides this one, hi, Mom.
Oh,
I love you, Mom.
Let's go.
But yeah, I mean, again, like we mentioned with the wide receivers, you're basically going like for like, but with a little more experience. Well, in Amir Hall's case, a lot more experience. That's kind of the big question is, what is the rotation going to look like? And I think, that'll ultimately be decided come fall, but, Hall's coming in here willing to work day one. I mean, he doesn't really care what spot. He reminds me a lot of a Josh Wallace.
Yep.
A lot of a Josh Wallace.
Yeah.
And, say what you will about the competition and stuff, but, I think he's coming in and he's got some good numbers. So we'll kind of see how that factors in. But I think it's pretty clear that Johnson and Hill are your 1 and 2. And then Amir Hall is going to factor in as well. And then Ricky Johnson will also kind of, be involved in some level. But I think the good thing now is there's depth, because, 2 weeks ago, we were talking, when was the last time we talked about the cornerback? We're having a conversation like, we feel pretty good about where these, corners are. However, if there's an injury, you're razor thin now. So now you're kind of looking at it like, okay, they could probably absorb an injury now. You wouldn't want to. I mean, I think that'll really, ruin a lot of things, but with Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson, and now you've got some guys in there that are experienced and have played games. So you're not just trotting out guys that haven't really, seen the field. So you can allow a couple other guys to develop in the process. But I mean, when you're comparing DJ Waller and Cam Calhoun, I mean, Waller showed some promise. Calhoun, didn't really play. And now you've got, Amir Hall, who's played a ton of football, and Ricky Johnson has played his fair share of football, and I think he's the biggest unknown out of this group. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing either. It's just, it's kind of really hard to predict a guy who hasn't really played much football, and his numbers are kind of, all over the place. But I think I do know one thing, and this goes for, the safeties too, that we'll talk about here in a minute. These guys do a lot of things well, but differently. I mean, you've got Amir Hall, who's a better coverage guy, Ricky Johnson, who's a better tackler, especially if you go through Pro Football Focus numbers that, I did a couple of weeks ago. Amir Hall graded out the best coverage wise. Ricky Johnson was the better tackler. And obviously we'll talk about the safeties too, because those two guys also have different things that they do well too. So you're not bringing in exactly the same player who does the same thing, who's going to have the same role. You've got guys that you can put in there in different situations who will excel over the other guy. So obviously, what you have with Will Johnson. You kind of know what you have with Jair Hill. You're hoping that kind of trajectory stays, up. But adding Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson in the mix, now you're talking about a rounded out group where you're not necessarily worrying about injuries. I mean, you always got to think about them, but now they can afford to absorb, a loss if, that were to happen. But, that obviously football is just a weird sport like that. So, yeah, I mean, I think again, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh man, these were the best additions. I think the Zavada, their kicker was their best portal addition out of all of them. And that's
a good point.
Crazy to say, but I think that was their best portal addition. But I mean, I think they're fine additions, and there's nothing wrong with fine additions. I said the same thing about Josh Wallace. It was fine. If he had a good season, that's the best case scenario. If Amir Hall, now we've got something to compare it to, right? If Amir Hall and Ricky Johnson have Josh Wallace-like seasons, best case scenario for Michigan's defense. And the same thing goes for wide receivers. If they have a Cornelius Johnson level type of season, best case scenario. So I just they're fine additions. They're the guys that have seen a lot of football that'll likely play a lot of football this year. And if they play well, Michigan did well in the portal, and that's all you can really say. But you're not going to see me here screaming from the mountaintop saying these were the best damn additions that they've ever done. Don't get me wrong. I do think a guy that we're going to talk about here in a second is an excellent addition, but it's
Troll Hart.
Yeah, and yeah, in more ways than one. But I think these are fine additions, and it's okay that they're fine. They don't have to make headlines all the time by adding these big name guys. I think they did great in the portal, and ultimately with the way they've been scouting the portal of late, I think they'll be just fine.
Yeah, that 2 weekends ago, I think it was when they added these 4 guys right in like 48 hours. That was arguably the biggest 48 hours of the off season. I mean, a month ago or whatever it was when we were on here talking, just like you said, Josh, it was Will Johnson and Jair Hill, and then question mark for that third corner spot. And what does Sharon Moore do? He goes out and he grabs Amir Hall and he grabs Ricky Johnson the third. And all of a sudden, your cornerback room goes from terribly thin to really deep. And I agree with Josh. Amir Hall is literally Josh Wallace 2.0. And Sharon Moore said it in the media availability, or I guess it wasn't an availability, but he was at the Sound Mind, Sound Body football camp at Wayne State this past week. And he said Amir Hall's personality is just like Josh Wallace's. And when Sharon Moore first reached out to Amir Hall, Hall said, "Coach, I just want to win you another championship." And sounds like he's a team first guy, and that's exactly what Michigan's looking for. I think they're in a great spot. I really do. I agree in the sense that Ricky Johnson is probably the biggest unknown there, but like Josh said, it's not a bad thing. You've got guys that can compete and make each other better and push for that second spot. Obviously, Will Johnson's going to anchor it down, and I'm just really excited about it. Amir Hall and Jair Hill, I think, are two guys that will really be able to push each other and fight for that second spot. But yeah, and Keyshawn Harris too is a guy that doesn't get enough love either. It really in the span of like 2 days went from incredibly thin to now. I think Michigan fans should feel really good about where they're at corner.
No, I agree. And the question mark of like, oh, well, but what if something happens to Will Johnson? It doesn't matter who you would have added if something happens to Will Johnson. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like we said the same thing. Well, if JJ gets hurt, well, there's not another JJ on the roster, right? Like that gap is always, he's the best corner in college football.
Right.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. So, man, you hope he stays healthy. That's just what you mean. There was nothing.
I do want to address. I see some comments here. Yeah, we're not. Obviously we know Jayshawn Barham is a.
Yeah, we were talking about this window.
Right, we're talking about this window, and it is funny because he's been on the team since like the early January. Where he feels like he's been on the team for years. Yeah, I mean this is
such a good.
Barham is like far and away the best guy that they picked up the whole portal cycle.
Or Freed.
Yeah, you got starter at guard too.
Freed too. Yeah. I mean, they did really well the first time around, but we're talking specifically about this window.
I could have put linebacker in this conversation. I didn't because you had 3 exits as well. And that was the group that was pretty thin a couple years ago, where it was like, this is Colston and Barrett, and that's it.
Yep.
And then they outed Houseman, right? And now by adding Barham, and that's starter level, and Houseman now up to starter level, and Hood making progress, and Rolder coming into his junior year, and then Cole Sullivan, who we've been hyped on since he committed. I mean, the guy's an absolute beast, somebody I thought was probably going to end up at edge, but it's looking more and more likely he's going to stay at linebacker, especially this first year. And then even Christian, is it Boivin or Bolvin? I feel like I always pronounce it wrong.
I think it's Boivin or something. It's weird. It's French.
He's a guy that's he's doing the Michigan thing, man. He's climbed up through special teams contributor, and he's probably going to see the field a little bit this year, at least add some depth. So look, I wish Jeremiah Beasley was still part of the equation, but that's a guy that it's like he literally was never part of the team and an early enrollee, right? Yeah. Leaving. And then obviously Samaj Bridgman trying to find that Sam role. It doesn't really seem like there's a fit in the defense anymore. He goes to Sparty. People had high expectations about Hayden, but man, Barham's just it, dude. Like you went out and got the best possible addition to replace Junior Colson. So yeah, I think big picture, the entire window, he's probably the best ad. But in this window specifically, yeah, Amir Hall, Josh, you brought up his numbers. This is a guy people always say, oh, he played where and the level of dude, look at the NFL and where these dudes play. Football is football. Right. He was targeted 100 times last year. Right. This dude's gotten reps. He had 5 interceptions, 12 pass breakups. 12. You know, like, I don't know. We'll see.
It's like Suggs too from Grand Valley. You know, a lot of people probably were scratching their heads when they saw Michigan.
Until he commits to LSU, and now we're mad we didn't get him. Right?
Yeah, right. And then a bunch of other schools follow suit after Michigan offers. And
so funny.
And obviously, Wisconsin really was first to offer him. But yeah, I mean, if you're the game of football, if you're talented, they're going to find you. It doesn't matter where you play, at what level of competition that you play at, they're going to find you. And again, that goes for the NFL too.
They probably just got missed in the high school cycle.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of these dudes, if they can't get to the camps, that's it these days, right? It's not a secret. We don't travel as much. And when I say we, I mean the larger recruiting above us, not us, the Michigan site, but rivals, or all the other site competitors. These guys don't go out and travel very much. The people that travel are the people on the smaller sites. They host these camps, and if you get to the camps, that gets you your recognition. Or when you start getting offers from big schools, that gets our attention. Look at the recruiting rankings, and all of a sudden, all the OSU commitments start going up in the rankings. A quarterback we'll get to in a moment that Michigan's on, all of a sudden, top 50 on Rivals now, right? The team's kind of got them first, right? So guys just get picked up. Sorry, I saw my name, call my attention. Anyway, so people asking, they kind of link together. I didn't include Jaden McBurrows and Zeke Berry in this part of the conversation. McBurrows is a guy that can probably play outside, but it feels like those two are kind of in the nickel spot. Maybe we include that here with safety because there's some flexibility there, right? But the biggest loss of the portal, in my opinion, no way around it, was Keon Sabb.
Yeah.
What he did last year, but more importantly, I think coming into this year, he was projecting to be really, really good. And I'm not going to pretend anybody that was added is at that level, right? But Michigan kind of did what Michigan always does. It's, you've lost Mike Sainer still, Rod Moore now with an injury, and then Keon Sabb transfer. There's probably not one guy that replaces that dude. Maybe there's two. Maybe there's rotation. Maybe there's scheme things, right? The committee approach, the money ball, right? You're not replacing Jason Giambi with one dude, right? So that's kind of what we've seen. Quentin Johnson coming back, I think, was an underrated big ad. He was solid last year. Sabb, Johnson, Moore, and Page, all 4 of those guys played very similar snap levels. Some of that was injury related. Some of it seemed to be even game scheme related. You saw Keon Sabb not really a factor in, was it Ohio State or Bama? I don't remember which game. And then obviously was instrumental in the national championship game. So, but anyway, that was another spot where it was like coming into the year, I'm like, man, Rod Moore's back. Johnson's back. Page is back. This is so deep. Uh-oh. Right. So 2 big additions here. One, the Michigan State transfer, good Lord, if you are on Twitter and saw
Yeah.
the back and forth between Mangum's family and Michigan State, not just fans, former players, well-respected writers in the community. I just could not believe it.
Yeah, embarrassing. Just embarrassing behavior.
Unbelievable. And then I keep wanting to call him Wes Welker, and I will.
Yeah.
Wesley Walker from Tennessee added in as well. Josh, you've already kind of touched on this, though. Very different players.
Yep.
I haven't put the depth chart together yet because I really have no idea how I think they're going to use these guys coming into the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I mean, I love Jang Mang. I love Jang Mang's addition because he has an extra year of eligibility, which would be huge for this group because you add another. You're going to lose. I mean, probably going to lose Rod Moore. I don't know what that situation looks like.
Yeah.
Excuse me, because obviously, I mean, he's eligible for a redshirt year, but that's a down the line conversation. But yeah, getting a guy like Jaden Mangum back, you lose Page after this year, you lose Quentin Johnson after this year. Adding Mangum back into the group, I mean, that's awesome. And the kid, just needs a good defense to play on. He just needs a good defensive system that puts him in good spots, and you'll start to see what he can do. Jaden Mangum last year, just despite how awful Michigan State's defense was last year, was pretty damn good in run coverage. In run coverage snaps, he was the highest graded addition Michigan made out of the 4 defensive backs. Wesley Walker, I think, is a fine addition. I think he's going to play. He's going to be good. Probably, I would say, the more underrated addition out of the 4 guys, probably beyond Ricky Johnson. I think Walker has the most promise behind Mangum and Hall. I think he will be that next guy that'll have a really good year. But again, and we're just talking strictly additions here. We're not leaving out Zeke Berry and Hillman and stuff. Those guys will play.
Very, very hyped on Brandon Hillman.
Yes.
Yeah. Zeke Berry will play. But again, this isn't a let's leave out guys. I mean, yeah, obviously Zeke and Hillman are going to play. But, we're just talking specifically just the additions here. And I think Jaden Mangum is an excellent addition as safety. Zeke, is he a safety? Is he a nickel? He can kind of play both. So I don't know really what will classify him yet. Hillman, obviously a pure safety, so he'll be in the mix. Again, you're essentially, we'll include a Rod Moore as a subtraction from the group, though Sharon Moore said he's ahead of schedule, which if you're looking at schedule-wise, you're talking probably a November return for Rod Moore. So if he comes back for the game, I mean, that would be gigantic. But again, we'll kind of see how he, heals up and what his rehab is like. I guess if you ever needed an injury to one of your best guys, I guess early spring is the time to do it. I mean, obviously you don't want to see anyone get injured, but time-wise, I guess that's probably the best case scenario, that he'll be back at some point. So anyway, that's down the line. But yeah, I just think you've got guys, as I said, you've got guys that do a lot of things really well. Mangum is really good in run coverage. Walker's really good in pass coverage. No touchdowns given up last year, which is really good numbers. So again, you've got depth there. You've got guys you can afford to, lose a guy or two if it came down to that. You got guys that have experience, other guys that are kind of ascending guys who've done really well in spring with Zeke and Hillman. A lot to like with the defensive backs. I feel a lot better about this group now coming out of spring. And I wasn't exactly, freaking out or worried, but you've got depth. They did exactly what they wanted to do. They addressed the depth, they added experience, and they, essentially, I would call when you're comparing the losses to additions, I would call it a wash. I don't think Michigan, the losses really outweigh the additions, and the additions don't really outweigh the losses. I think Michigan is right where they need to be heading into August and obviously the summer. And we'll see how things go. But again, there's a lot to like. I mean, I think Michigan did a really good job identifying guys and getting in quick and really getting these guys in. Like Mangum had his fair share of suitors, and Michigan got in and sealed the deal pretty quickly. Like Wesley Walker too. So yeah, a lot to like for sure.
Of the 4 defensive back additions, I think I'm highest personally on Jaden Mangum. I think he's an absolute stud, and I agree with what you said, Josh. He needs a good defense to play on. He was a star on just a terrible Michigan State defense last year, and I think if he has better pieces around him than what he had last year in East Lansing, I think he's going to really flourish and thrive at Michigan. And so I'm really high on him. I do think he's going to be right there, probably the leader is what I'd have him at to start there next to Makari Page. Wesley Walker is a guy going into his 6th year of college football at his 5th school, which is insane.
Modern college football.
Yeah.
I'd have to look back. It's a crazy journey, and I'd have to look to see exactly how it went. But Georgia Tech, I think Ole Miss was in there, Tennessee, and Louisville, I believe, were the 4 schools before Michigan. But just a crazy journey for him. I do like that pickup. He's an experienced guy, played a lot of football. So I do think Michigan's in a good spot. And obviously, Zeke Berry, Brandon Hillman. This kind of goes hand in hand with what we were talking about at corner. Michigan was pretty thin a couple weeks ago, and all of a sudden you grab Jaden Mangum, grab Wesley Walker, not Wes Welker, the wide receiver for the Patriots. It's tricky. It's you grow up watching Wes Welker, and all of a sudden there's a Wesley Walker. But yeah, I like where Michigan's at here. I'm curious though. Obviously, this is way down the line, and we're looking at November. But I wonder what would happen if Michigan is, say, like 10-0 heading into the Northwestern game on November 23rd, and Rod Moore is ready to come back, but Michigan's undefeated. The defense is good without him. I wonder if you force him back, for that Northwestern game or the week leading up to the Ohio State game, or if you just, stick with what you have and roll with it. I'm curious to see if Rod Moore does, continue ahead of schedule, as Sharon Moore was saying, if they try and force him back, if the team is playing well, or if they keep him out, if things are going well.
I don't think it's a team decision at all.
Yeah.
I think it's whatever Rod Moore wants to do. Rod Moore has given everything he needs to give to this program.
Yeah, sure.
So whatever is best for his future or whatever. But if Rod Moore tells you he's good enough to play, you're playing Rod Moore.
Yeah, and
that's just my opinion.
Within that redshirt window too, like the last, I think it's 4 games. Is it 4 games now?
Yeah, they can.
They're allowed to play in at any point.
Well, the playoff doesn't count.
Yeah, so you're talking in your scenario 10-0. You're assuming Michigan wins those last 2 games. Yeah. There's a 3rd game, and the playoffs don't count. So if Rod Moore is set on coming back next year, you're preserving a red shirt regardless. I mean, so why not? I think he's too good. If he wants to come back and play, I think he's too good to leave off the field. I mean, that's just another.
And that doesn't mean he's starting and playing more snaps. You don't know what that looks like. To your point,
yeah.
I don't know. Man, that's just something that if that happens, oh my God. I thought he was going to the NFL anyway.
Yeah.
So I more just feel bad for the dude. He deserves, this is a guy that came in. I mean, we've told this story a bunch of times. Kid from Ohio, didn't get the OSU offer, underrated 3-star, starts contributing as a freshman, becomes one of the leaders on the defense, makes a legendary play like every single TV broadcast before Michigan, Ohio State.
Yeah.
Right? When they show Charles Woodson fighting with David Boston, they are going to show Rod Moore's interception.
Yep.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's the level of what that play was. That was his elbow, not a football, you idiots. I still see people posting that. And it's just Good Lord. But
That's
yeah,
all they have the grasp onto these days.
it's unbelievable. Anyway, Mangum, I don't know how many times this, and this kind of ties in with Amir Hall as well, and Josh Wallace in the previous year. When you're a really, really good football player on a bad team, that hurts you.
Yeah.
And when you're a really good football player on a really good team, it's a team sport, man. If your
Mhm.
other 10 dudes are really, really good, you're going to be better.
Yeah.
Right? So Mangum, who was Michigan State's most important player for Rossi's defense and blah, 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 until he left and he was a bum and they didn't want him anymore.
Yeah.
Look, honorable All-American, or excuse me, honorable All Big Ten last year. Did he make some mistakes? Yeah. But, Josh, we keep talking about, I agree. I think he's known, or at least what I see, is a guy that has the speed and intensity to get up quick and make an impact in the run game. Very Sainer-esque in that aspect. He also had 4 or 5 picks last year?
Yeah, something like that.
And
yeah.
a couple of them were right place, right time.
Right.
Have to be the dude standing there or whatever. But
Yeah.
he was every player on Michigan's secondary who had enough snaps graded above him. But they graded above everybody in Michigan State secondary. They've been atrocious, some of the worst in college football for 2 years. Yeah. He's the bright spot. He's the guy that wanted to come here, but we took Keon Sabb and Zeke Berry. Now Sabb's out. He comes in. He's playing with Berry. I'm really excited about that ad. And if he's not, he doesn't have to be the best player in the secondary like he had to at East Lansing. Mm-hmm. Right? So it's a good fit. And then Walker, I'd have to look who he actually – I think he committed to schools and didn't stay because the only thing he's got listed is Tennessee and Georgia Tech as schools he's actually played for. But I know because Ricky had committed somewhere else before, right? Because
Washington State.
Yeah, I can't keep up with it. But
yeah.
As far as this question, any chance there's more portal additions? The only one I think the fishing line was out on defensive tackle for a while there.
Yep.
I know there's still a couple of names floating there. I thought I almost put offensive line in here as well, kind of in the same vein as nothing really happened. There was some talk that maybe a tackle or another interior offensive lineman. I take that as a good sign.
Yeah.
You're happy about Miles, and we've got, I'm hitting my wall now, boys. Gentry versus Percy at right tackle. Yeah. So again, some of it's probably a wash, but I like the depth. And I like the pieces, and I like the potential they've added. It's a really, really good defense, no matter what. If they're not the best defense in the country, they're going to be second or third, right? We can get the defensive front and everything as well there. But we did want to touch on recruiting. So obviously, coming into June, this is kind of the start. Things are going to start to pick up a little bit here. Keep an eye on the Den, Michigan.rivals.com. Obviously, coming into tomorrow in a couple days, we'll start to have more intel out of this weekend. But we did have some big visitors. A couple guys from Bishop Gorman. If you're not familiar, it's a program out in Vegas, national caliber program. Running back Micah Kahapana, recently added from there. O-lineman Douglas, is it Utu?
Yeah.
Utu? Okay, Douglas Utu. Wide receiver Derek Meadows. Which there's been some good traction with some big target wide receivers on the trail. Very intriguing there. A defensive tackle, DJ Sanders, and a name that's really been picking up steam for Michigan, linebacker Marco Jones.
Big time.
Those are kind of the 4 big visitors this weekend. Like I said, Josh, I know it's early. We don't have all our intel yet, but what do you got on those folks there?
Yeah, I think, from where the best standing for Michigan is right now, I'd say
real quick, Josh. Mr. Brock, you said you good? Yeah. Brock has not been on you're muted right now.
Sorry, I'm muted. To be honest, I'm not I don't keep up too much with the recruiting, so I'm not going to be much of a help here or have any insight. So
it has been very good to see you, and thank you. I know you have a very busy life, and I appreciate you covering for me the last few weeks.
Absolutely. You bet. Buddy. Good talking with you guys. I'll see you later.
This is a good question. I don't think Carmelo English did.
No, I haven't seen anything. That was weird.
Yeah, there's something going on there, but that's a sad thing about the portal that doesn't get talked about a lot. Like a lot of those guys end up at lower programs, and it's like 30 or 40%
Yeah.
Don't commit to a new school.
Yeah. Like, what do you do at that point? Like,
Awful, dude.
yeah. What
Awful.
happened?
Go ahead. I'll look into it, but I don't think he did. But I'll look into it.
Yeah. So, talking about the first week of June, or excuse me, the first weekend of June, I think when you're looking at where Michigan sits, also want to add to, they added Kainoa Winston as well. It was also
Yes. Okay.
I think Marco Jones, I think Michigan has the best shot with right now. I know Michigan did a really, really good job during a earlier spring visit that really vaulted them up into considerable spot in this recruitment, and coming out of the visit, I don't think that really changed. Now, again, I'm not going to sit here and say, Michigan's on commit watch and all that kind of stuff. I don't think, Michigan might have been fringe leaders for all 5 guys that were visiting. I'm not going to definitively say Michigan was leading for any guys, but I mean, these visits certainly helped. Douglas Utu again brought his whole family with him to campus this weekend, which is
I gotta find that tweet because they had some sweet Michigan gear.
Yeah,
they all had like old jackets. It was awesome.
Yeah, all of the whole family visited, which I think from if you pay attention to visits, if a kid brings his entire family on a visit, I think that really shows how serious a kid is in a program. And Michigan has been right there. Like Jones visited during the spring, had a really strong visit, and I think Michigan is right there for both Utu and Jones. Sanders has been likened to me after talking to some people like a ghost. Doesn't talk much. Doesn't do any camps. And even his high school program itself is kind of hard to talk about. So he's a kid that I'm gonna have to track down and talk to people that know people to get some sort of idea of where things are, because really, like, even if you go to his profile on Rivals, the last story on him was like February or something crazy like that, talking about just how elusive he really is.
Dudes don't like the process, man.
Yeah,
some dudes like it too much, arguably.
I respect it.
I'd say it's almost refreshing to see somebody not want to tell everybody what they're
doing. No, absolutely. I respect it. Just do the process, put in the work, and end up where you end up. And
for those watching, look at the swag, man.
Yeah,
look at these coats. Looking good.
Doug's his jacket's pretty sweet.
That's legit. But you got the all leather on his sister here. Mom's rocking that. Oh yeah, I just thought that was really cool. But yeah, to your point, I mean, we've heard Michigan recruits families as much as anything else, right?
Yeah, so that's big time. Absolutely big time. And Derek Meadows too. I would say that Notre Dame is probably the team to beat. Well, not probably. They are the team to beat for Derek Meadows right now. So Michigan would have had to do a lot to beat Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame's got the #1 recruiting class in the country right now, according to Rivals. So again, this weekend, I don't think it really was for sealing the deal with any guys. I think this was kind of mostly to make up ground. Obviously, if they're visiting, they have some interest, but I do think Michigan's kind of battling uphill for Meadows. Marco Jones and Utu, I think both of those guys are in contention for sure. And then DJ Sanders and even Winston too. He's another guy I'll have to ask about. I know Michigan was in a pretty good spot, so we'll kind of see where that goes. But again, it's only Sunday. Most of these guys leave Sunday morning, so there's not a whole lot to go on right now, but only initial stuff. So hopefully we will have some updates here in the coming days. I know our Adam Gorney is expected to talk to a couple of guys too, so we'll kind of see where things are at. But I mean, you'll never hear from anyone that Michigan's had, a kid had a bad visit. So, me saying, these visits were good. I mean, well, no duh. I mean, it happens every time they're out there. I mean, it's really hard. It's very rare where a kid has a really bad official visit. So, we posted on the website today about some checklist stuff that Michigan needs to do.
Yep, I've got that on the next slide.
Yeah. So gaining momentum was number one on my list, and that's something that Michigan needs to do this month. And June 21st, I mean, that's the big one. I mean, that's the big weekend where all of their big hitters are going to be on campus. I mean, double-digit, guys are going to be they're going to be on campus. So I know Sharon Moore was brought in, or I shouldn't say brought in, was elevated to be the guy that kind of stabilizes things and keeps the status quo. And in a way that he did. I mean, he did do that in a lot of ways.
Yes.
However, there were some staff losses that, were unexpected. I mean, guys who said
they're starting from scratch.
Yeah.
On the recruiting trail.
Yeah.
He's a new head coach.
Yep.
Kids are going to want to know. They're not just going to say, oh yeah, I guess things are the same. They want to see it.
Right. You've got an offensive line coach / coordinator who's now starting to build relationships with a defensive lineman's family.
100%.
He doesn't talk to defensive lineman recruits. So now he is. I mean, but you are in a lot of ways building from the bottom up while keeping the status quo, while keeping the culture. So yeah, of course, recruiting is slow and not doing well right now because they've brought in new guys at a lot of key positions, a lot of defensive line coach, new defensive back coach, new linebacker coach, mostly the same on offense. And you've seen, some momentum pick up on offense with a lot of wide receivers like
the only coach with no change to his position title is Ron Bellamy.
Yeah.
Even Newsom staying, different position, promoted.
Yeah.
Kirk Campbell promoted.
Yep.
Right. The only staff member still in the same spot as Bellamy.
Yeah. No, So you're starting from the ground up in a lot of ways. And that's just what's going to happen is that Michigan is going to lose ground with guys when you have to start over. So.
Okay. Cameron. Here we go. You are living in this bubble. Yes. New coaches get a spike. Marcus Freeman had a spike when he got hired. Sharon Moore came in. We saw them get Nate Marshall.
Yeah.
Right. They have their quarterback. Every single program is in this new world of transfer portal. Right. We saw the playoff teams, Alabama, Washington, lose their head coaches and a lot of their best players. Washington literally doesn't have a single offensive player left. Keon Sabb was a big loss, but Will Johnson is still here. Mason Graham is still here. Kenneth Grant is still here. Colston Loveland is still here. And programs came after them hard. NIL came through, kept that together. Right? Like they're going to get a bump, but all the momentum of winning a national championship is gone with a complete coaching turnover. Right? And so much of high school relationships has moved to or high school recruiting has moved to relationships, and those are starting over. And the NIL piece, Jared Wangler just said they are involved with conversations on high school recruits. Are they going to drop massive bags where a high school recruit 4-star is making more money than players currently on the team? No, because that doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
And if you, I can't be jealous of Kentucky. They can keep doing their system. It's not working. Texas A&M, it wasn't working. Right? Michigan has their system. It's going to work. These new guys got to get their feet wet. And work. We'll see post-summer, like Josh, you're saying, gain the momentum, make the focus. Post-summer, I'll start to get maybe more nervous, but like they just won a national championship, getting their guys, keeping their guys, filling in gaps in the transfer portal, and they just did the exact same thing this offseason. Yeah. And you got to pepper in the star players, right? You had a Will Johnson. Right. And that's why I'm like, hey, you can go get a Nate Marshall, a dude like that. Right. Those guys are out there.
Right.
And they're in on them. But I don't know. They don't sign until December. Right.
Like if you want to get a massive bag and go 7-5 or get a massive bag and be a runner-up in your conference 3 years in a row, go ahead. That's none of my business. I'm too busy focusing on Michigan coming off a national championship and them with a new regime and new staff and them trying to build new relationships.
You can't get the new regime spike if it's not something new and fresh, right?
Right.
Harbaugh got a spike because he was replacing Hoke. New energy, fun, right? Notre Dame, when Kelly left, there was this weird aura around the program. Freeman had already been there for a year. He was the DC, got promoted, players loved him, whatever, but they still came out struggling. They're doing really well right now because I don't think people realized how good their team was last year. They were top 10 offense and defense, only program in the country. And the current playoff format benefits them greatly.
Yeah.
They're basically a lock to get in at large every single year.
I do think Freeman is a snake oil salesman, but whatever. It's again, none of my business.
Yeah, but ND, here's the thing too. Notre Dame is one of those. There's programs, frankly, Michigan is one of them to a point too. But there are programs for different reasons that are just always going to recruit well, right? Notre Dame is national and obviously has their Catholic ties, which are huge for them, right? But Notre Dame, Penn State, especially around Pennsylvania, right? It like to see Florida struggle is hilarious to me. Texas, like some of these programs, you just have to be there and you're going to recruit well. If you can add a great coach and some success, you go to a whole nother level, right? But like Notre Dame has always been this kind of thorn in Michigan's side and always will be. They're very similar programs with national appeal. And technically, Freeman's got a little bit of a head start right now, I guess. But
it's all about recruiting is all about relationships. Yeah, like you can talk about the bag, you can talk about all that stuff, but you have to have relationships. And as much as kids want to say, "Oh yeah, I'm not committing to a coach. I'm committing to a school." They're committing to a coach. They're committing to their position coach 9 times out of 10. I mean, it's
you know what the truth is now with the transfer portal. When that coach leaves, do they stay?
No,
right?
Not more.
And in Michigan, they did.
No, so. Yeah. And that's also credit to Champion Circle and Valiant for keeping them happy as well. And I mean, they had to really raise a little more money than they were expecting because some other teams were offering ridiculous bags. But again, I mean, I hate what college football is turning into personally. I hate it. But, you have to deal with what the what it is these days, and Michigan is just going to have to navigate it just like everyone else. And I think the revenue sharing schools now that can be involved in NIL deals, I think and the way Michigan is setting things up, I think they're going to be fine. And I
think they've been setting up for the future we're now going to.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, obviously, I've been screaming from the mountaintops about revenue sharing for years. So it's not like this is some foreign concept that surprised them. So, it's just, I mean, this is kind of, as Matt brought up, Michigan was the number 1 recruiting class last year. Yeah, that's because they had a hot start and they were so far ahead of everyone else that everyone else eventually caught up. And then they ended up right where they typically are, around the 10 to 15 mark in the recruiting classes. So, all it comes down to, and I said this in the story that I posted today, Michigan just needs to get a couple over the finish line, and it will quell some fears. I mean, maybe not Nate. They're going to be Nate Marshall types, but if you land some guys that they're in on,
like you didn't get the bump from him because it came out of nowhere,
right?
It just kind of happened, and then it was like, wait, what?
Exactly. So, look, it is what it is. You're just going to have to deal with it. As much as you complain about NIL and recruiting, it's not going to change. And Ward Manual has nothing to do with recruiting and NIL, for crying out loud. That is such the oldest, most tired bit in existence. And whatever. But look, it's just, they started from ground zero basically, and they're working their way up. It's just like, I mean, I don't know. They just have to get a couple of guys over the finish line. I mean, what am I talking about? No one's going to be satisfied, even when that does happen. People are still going to complain that they're not high enough rated or whatever. So no one's ever going to be happy, fully happy. But whatever.
It's a thing where until I see, and even this year, we've talked about if they're 9-3 and get into the playoff that way, I don't think that's a terrible season for them. I don't know what a terrible first year would look like. It's got to be enough to derail everything, but we've seen in terms of what Schroen said he was going to do, which is, adding a GM, which is adding a bunch of people to the recruiting department, which he has. Just this last week, he was 5 or 6 new recruiting analysts hired, right? It was reaching out directly to the boosters and being more involved with the fundraising. Because that's the thing too, like you said, Josh, this isn't Michigan. It's not Ward Manual, right? It's not the collectives. It's the boosters. There are some wealthy people that haven't been contributing because, again, they're not rich because they give away money. They got to know what they're going to get out of it.
Right. It's a return on investment. And as I've said a million times, it's not up to the fans to raise money for NIL.
No,
fans can't raise $20 million.
No,
they can't
so much.
And they shouldn't have to. And that's why the school, and that's why revenue sharing is coming into play 100%. And these schools that now can spend money and stuff. That's how it should be. It shouldn't be up to the fans to fund NIL deals.
Sorry, I know we're kind of in a ramble spot, but I like this. I feel like this is maybe where we say some of our best stuff. I don't want to hear the word amateurism being
that's gone.
As a concern from anybody related to the schools or NCAA ever again, because as soon as this revenue sharing deal comes out, what is the very next thing you hear? They're going to start putting corporate sponsors on jerseys, right?
Yeah.
Why? Because you just lost revenue.
Yeah.
And you need to recover it. This is greed and nothing but.
Yeah.
College football lost amateurism, not because of anything with the players, but because these schools started signing these massive TV contracts, started selling jerseys online with the players' numbers on them, right? You've been profiting off of them, making millions, billions in some situations for years and years. And then you're going to blame the players for wanting a piece of it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then as soon as they do get a piece, you're like, well, we want to put a corporate sponsor on a college jersey. Shut up. Oh, it just disgusts me. So I'm with you. I don't love where college football is. I hope it kind of levels out. But as long as Fox is paying Michigan $100 million to air football games, those players should get some of that money.
Thank you, John. Some common sense. Yes. The next cycle you can judge recruiting. And I mean, you can, yes, you can judge this cycle, of course, but I think because Michigan has done such a good job in the portal that they can offset some of these losses. I mean, you're talking about, and I'm not calling these guys out in particular. They can do whatever the hell they want. I don't care. But like guys like Amir Herring and Jeremiah Beasley, they're on campus for a cup of coffee. You spend all this time recruiting them. They're on campus for a cup of coffee and they leave. I mean, and again, I'm not calling them out. That's the facts. This is what happened. So, why waste all that time recruiting someone when you can kind of just go into the portal and get someone a like guy in who's willing to put in the work, who has experience that you can play. So again, it kind of offs like, where does the line draw? Where's the line get drawn with recruiting and recruiting the portal? Is where is your value? And Michigan, so far, Michigan's value right now, the most, they're having value at both places. Of course, they develop talent. I mean, that's how they won the national championship, is they developed and they scouted the right guy. So I just don't know where that line is drawn, because you're spending, and again, like Herring and Beasley, those are minor, they're not plaguing Michigan, so these are minor examples, but at that point, why do you bother when you can just bring a guy in from the portal, so, there's a lot that goes into it. There's a lot that goes into it.
Well, and frankly, the recruiting rankings have really moved from projection of success in college to where are they going to be drafted in the NFL.
Yeah.
That's really like how these recruiting services are measuring themselves. I want to know how many of my 5-stars end up first round picks.
Right.
Right. And what happens is a lot of these rankings are adjusted based on where they go. Somebody goes to Ohio State, LSU, whatever, at a position that typically they're known for, and they skyrocket up the rankings because they think they're more likely to be a first round pick. And when that happens, that looks good for the recruiting service, right?
Right.
Post COVID, I talked about at the beginning of the show. The real grinders on this stuff are the guys that work for the sites and really build the relationships and go and watch these dudes play and have a better understanding of them. We talked about Jaden Davis, the whole Elite 11 nonsense, right? And now you've got, it just doesn't add up. You could talk about the lowest rated class for Jim Harbaugh was the 2018 class, which absolutely transformed this program, right? And even 2022, the number 1 ranked recruit on Rivals we had was Darius Clemens, right? And Kenneth Grant was a 3-star, right? So there's misses, right? So until, I put it up, developing, scouting, winning, the formula Michigan's done with these top 15-ish classes and finding the dudes and peppering them in. Then go check his best class. Exactly. And what happened from that. It's just, and we saw, like you said, a Jeremiah Beasley and Amir Herring, these guys that I was excited about leave before they're even hardly on campus or before they make any impact. The way I look at high school recruiting has just changed so much. It's interesting to me, especially the guys that are more likely to stick. Yeah. But it's almost turned into like baseball, like the baseball draft. Like, other than the rare occasional guy, they're not going to make an impact right away.
Right.
Some of the dudes that make the biggest impact, you didn't even think about them. Like, oh, they're a 7th round pick. What? You know what I mean? So, right. And then some of your best players end up being guys you pick up from other teams.
Yeah.
Right. So it's just this constantly evolving thing. So anyway, all right. We did kind of have a ramble fit. I did want to talk on the QB piece because this was a very big week. Mm-hmm. It felt like already the momentum was kind of moving towards Brady Hart for Michigan, which if you want to have a more Michigan name,
yeah, right.
I'd love to know what his middle name is. But Noah Grubbs was a guy Michigan was obviously very intrigued on early. Yeah. He commits to Notre Dame, and then Will Griffin commits to Florida. Those are probably, spots 1, 2, and 3 in terms of Michigan for Brady Hart.
Yeah.
Right. So it feels like that's a big door opening. Obviously, he has some other options. And then Brady, what?
Smigel. I think it's Smigel. I think it's Smigel.
Yeah. Brady Woodson, Howard Hart.
Yeah.
But anyway, kind of how do you feel about, Michigan obviously got their guy in Jaden Davis. Oh my God, my brain is melting. Who is their QB right now?
Carter Smith.
Thank you. Carter Smith's a guy, again, Elite 11, LOL.
What a joke, by the way.
Yeah.
I don't even get me started on that crap. Yeah. I could not care less.
He's a guy that becomes more and more intriguing, and he's already was awarded best player in Florida by a Gatorade and a couple other services.
Right. And he doesn't even make the Elite 11. What an absolute joke. Yeah. What a joke.
A lot of JJ vibes there in terms of the way he speaks and some of his intangibles, along with being a very strong passer and good in the run game. But I think they feel really good about Carter. And then obviously now moving to 2026.
Yeah. No, it's really funny. I was on the phone with one of my guys today and, discussing the official visit weekend.
That's what I thought too.
Yeah. That would be pretty funny. And he told me, like, hey, Brady Hart's probably going to be the guy for Michigan, like the top guy at quarterback. And, he was right there. I mean, Noah Grubbs was their number 1 guy on the board. Told him as much. during his visit earlier in the spring. And obviously he goes to Notre Dame. So Brady Hart, I think, is probably ahead of Brady Smigel. Even though Smigel is a 5-star on Rivals and Brady Hart is right behind him at a 4-star, I do think that Michigan values Brady Hart more. And I would not at all be shocked to see some momentum with Brady Hart building there between him and Michigan. And I thought I saw someone in the chat mention that there was a prediction elsewhere for him to Michigan, which again would not be at all surprising. And I just think it is kind of funny that happened. We posted that today and that happened. So
the Notre Dame smoke is that Brady Hart to Michigan. Yeah. So
yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense. It was probably between Noah Grubbs and Brady Hart, and whoever committed first won. So
Michigan's been on the right side of that a few times.
Yeah, if Brady Hart's a consolation prize, darn. We'll be like, well, that's totally fine. They're good with that. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, again, I think Michigan's recruited the quarterback position really well. I mean, they've had their fair share of losses. I mean, Underwood is Bryce Underwood is a loss, but Carter Smith is just as I think he's good. Brady Hart.
Did you see his comments?
Underwood?
Yeah.
No, I didn't see it.
Somebody was asking him about, just his commitment process and, talking about, quarterbacks already. He goes, in Michigan, he kind of dogged Michigan, and it was like, all right, man, you want to talk about Brian Kelly's quarterbacks?
Yeah, whatever. I mean, I don't even know why Michigan bothers recruiting Belleville anymore, to be honest with you. I mean,
that's all different conversation.
Yeah. What's the point? Anyway,
I hate to sound so petty, but this is so true. Tavion St. Clair, when Ohio State took them, was like, wow, it's kind of surprising that they took his commit because he was a lower rated QB.
Yeah.
And again, to my argument about the way these recruiting services work sometimes, and everyone's like, wow, I'm surprised they took him so early, given some of the quarterback losses they've had in previous classes. What happened with Raiola? I'm surprised they took the lower guy so early. And now he's like number 2 QB, 5-star.
Yeah.
Hasn't played football since, but
right. They're all gonna kiss. They're gonna kiss Ohio State's ass about how great, scouting they are and all that kind of crap. Who cares? Like it's all it's stupid. I hate recruiting. Like let's be honest. I hate the whole what it's become. I hate the coverage of it. You're putting these young teenagers on these pedestals, following, and stalking these young kids that are kids. And and just like I just think it's all gross, but it is what it is. So John, to answer your question, I mean if Smigel came to Michigan tomorrow and said, well, actually, you know what, that's now that I think about it, if Brady Hart wanted to wait and Smigel tomorrow was like, hey, I want to commit, I don't know if Michigan, I mean, maybe I don't know. You got a 5-star quarterback that wants to commit to you tomorrow. Do you say no for a guy that you value more? I don't know. I mean, I would say, there probably would either or. They'd be perfectly fine with either or. But I think they value Brady Hart more than they do Smigel. So
it's interesting because they're similar prospects.
Yeah.
And potentially it could be Michigan and Florida State, one or the other for the two of them.
Right.
Hart's from Florida and Smigel's California, right?
Yeah.
But Florida State's high on both. So, I don't know. That's where things get interesting. That's where the conversations with Kirk Campbell and Sharon Moore, I don't know.
It's a tough question. I mean, if I were Michigan, I'd say whoever wants to commit first wins. And you're deciding between a fringe 5-star and a 5-star. I wouldn't care at that point.
This isn't
probably has the higher ceiling considering how high he's jumped up the rankings, but man, I mean, I don't know how you could go wrong with either guy, honestly.
No, and it's just, again, it's such a weird, it's just weird now. You know what I mean? Like it's such an interesting dynamic, especially with quarterback recruiting. Like, I mean, Dante Moore was a different animal altogether, right? And Underwood, I mean, we for a very long time were like that thing's dead, and then Kurt Campbell got them beyond involved,
right?
To to the point where we say he's home here. He was at Michigan every other week, it felt like, and maybe Michigan's a front runner at one point.
Don't give me all that crap about talking crap about Michigan recruiting. You were there every other weekend, like ridiculous.
I think, and I told a lot of people too, I thought what was going to matter the most in that recruitment was what happened on the field, because it is just so easy to negatively recruit Michigan at quarterback.
Yep.
On how they win football games.
Yep.
And JJ has this moment where he was the Heisman favorite at one point, and then he gets hurt at Maryland, and then obviously doesn't throw the ball with Penn State and the numbers. And then that narrative completely exploded again. And it was, look, if they're not going to chuck the ball all over the yard with JJ, which is true, but you can still win a national championship and be a top 10 pick. Right. And, the LSU part of it, Jaden Daniels, you go back and look at this, JJ's on the bench when Michigan's up, and LSU's out there padding his stats in games. They didn't win a single game. They were an underdog, right? They lose 4 games, whatever. Right. Yeah. I don't know. And it's easy it's easy to fall in love with LSU, man, that stadium environment. And, and every kid's got something different too. And we've talked about, some people don't want to stay home and blah, blah, blah. Everybody's motivated by different things. But Michigan is just never going to be the team that lets a quarterback pad stats and air it out. That's not how they win football games.
Right.
So you get guys like Jaden Davis and Carter who have these tools and are arguably underrated for what I think are just stupid, easy mechanical fixes. People forget JJ was the same thing. People were worried about his elongated throw and blah, blah, blah. Easy stuff to fix. And I think they're kind of in the same boat here.
Yep.
With the 2 Bradys. So, but something to watch.
Yeah. No. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if Michigan gets by the end, if I'm trying to figure out when both are visiting. I think they might be visiting this month or relatively soon. I would not be surprised if Michigan has a quarterback for 2026 by the end of the summer. I would not. And you'll see, I mentioned this too in the article I posted today. This is a key time for 2026 too, because you're building a relationship with guys who have a lot longer timeline than 2025 kids. So you might see more immediate impact with 2026 recruits than you would 2025, because a lot of guys are still kind of building that relationship in 2026. So this, you might see Michigan be more successful in the short term with 2026 recruiting than you will in 2025, just because hasn't been that much time they've lost with the new staff and starting over. So
which is a bummer. They were pretty invested in 25, but there's just nothing you can do about what's happened at this point.
So this summer is just as important for 26 as it is 25. I mean, obviously the emphasis is on 25, but this is, you can really springboard yourself for 26 with this, with this summer of positive momentum.
Yeah. And I think this is probably going to be, Michigan last year, part of the reason they were ranked number 1 so early is they took a lot of guys early. They were getting the dudes they wanted. And, we didn't have that late rush at the end of the year we typically see with Michigan. So they had a lot of commits. I mean, we were talking by like September, October, it's like they pretty much have filled out most of this class. Yeah. I think this year's probably going to be back to more of what we're used to, because people are going to want to see Michigan on the field this year.
Right.
And as much as they love Sherrone Moore and, obviously the defense they're buying in, and, it's new guys. And again, it's so easy to negatively recruit. So a lot of things have planned into their head. Michigan's going to have to come out and look like Michigan. And ideally, right out the gate, you win that Texas game.
Yeah.
And it just changes everything. I think Michigan can have a strong year because of the 12-team playoff, and Texas being a non-con, and you still having a factor in the Big Ten. You know, if you play Texas close, even if you lose, we've seen the committee in the past where losing to a really good team is worth more than beating the crap out of a nobody. They don't care. It's worth nothing to you.
Right.
You know, Michigan in 2022 is what, 164-17 in their first 3 non-cons, and everyone's like, yeah, but their schedule is weak. Yeah, but they destroyed them. What else were they supposed to do?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So you can lose to Texas and be okay. You can lose to Oregon and be okay, and then even lose to Ohio State. Hopefully you don't, right? But if you're 9-3 and those are your 3 losses, you're probably in the playoff.
Right.
Which is crazy. But if you beat Texas, then yeah, Bama lost to Texas. Yeah, in their building. Yeah, exactly. And that was before the expansion, 100%. Yeah, but if you beat Texas, man, now all these narratives are just gone instantly because your defense is elite.
Yep.
Maybe if you've beaten Texas, the offense is good enough. And I think that just momentum on the field and off the field with recruiting, game changer. So that first big game of the year is just going to be massive for everything. So,
absolutely.
All right. So covered some roster moves with the transfer portal, obviously got into recruiting a little bit. Like we said, Josh is going to have a lot more going into the week as we start to track down some of these folks. So make sure you're over at michigan.rivals.com inside the den, getting his intel. Listen, I don't know. I'm assuming I won't be back next week. Don't know when. I will keep everybody updated on Twitter. And hopefully we have something close to normal very soon. But, as always, we appreciate all your guys' support. This has been another episode where we've been consistently above 1,000 folks, and you've stayed in here for a long time. You've been a part of the conversation and the live comments. You guys are just an awesome community, and I missed you. I'm glad I got to come back. This was really enjoyable. So continue to subscribe, so you do the notification bell so you know when we go live. If you're watching this on playback, hey, appreciate you. But again, join us live, be a part of the conversation. We try to include folks as much as we can. Never want to feel like we're talking at you. We're here talking with you. So we will make sure we have the next stream posted in advance so you guys know again when we go live. But until the next time, thank you again, and we'll see you very soon, hopefully, here on Hail to the Podcast.